This show is sponsored by Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. My guest today is a seasoned communicator with over 20 years of experience in media, public relations, corporate communications, community relations, and public speaking. Her work on her own experience as a buyer and seller, many times over as well as a divorcing homeowner, she's been recruited to be one of the head coaches for her broker's pilot coaching program, now regional to New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, and set to be rolled out nationally over the next few years. She is also training with superstar speaking coach Jess Ekstrom to become a top female public speaker. Outside of work, she serves her industry community as a founding member of Women's Council of Realtors, North Central, where she has served on the local and state boards for 4 years. A member and chair of the Communications Committee of the New Jersey Association of Realtors, and active part of NCJR Community Outreach and Young Professionals Network Advisory Board. She's born and raised in Manhattan's Greenwich Village. Please welcome Kat Timpson. Welcome to the show, Kat.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure having you on. I also want to mention to everyone that you are a sales associate realtor at Caldwell Bankers and Coldwell Bankers, sorry, and a keynoter, a public speaker. I love it. I love when I have my people on the show. It feels good. Feels good.
That's what it would be a good connection because we both love the communicating thing.
Yes. Shout out to Howie for introducing us. Howie is a longtime Toastmaster with myself. I met him in Toastmasters. Just a really great guy. He always comes up with these really cool speeches about his travels through the mountains. He's a big hiker and camper, and he's got all these really cool presentations that he's done for us of pictures of where he's traveled, and Grand Canyon, of course, being one of the notable ones. So cool. And then he also, what's really cool and what we're going to be talking a lot about is his storytelling abilities to be able to speak about camping and hiking and doing all these cool outdoor things and then relating it back to his business and his financial services and life insurance business that he does, his practice that he does. And he does it so seamlessly that you don't even know that you're building a relationship with someone who can help you with your finances. So it's so cool. And then he introduced us to each other, knowing that there'd be some sort of synergy. And here we are on the show.
Yeah, I think some people are just sort of born connectors. Howie's definitely one. I definitely love that aspect of getting together with people and just always thinking, like, who can I put together with whom? Like, is it somebody who they could benefit from? Or is it somebody they have a lot of commonality with? Whatever it is, just putting people together. And I have friends whose business is called Super Connector Media because it's so valuable in your business to actually connect people. That's the whole goal, right? So we can do business together. So I was super excited to meet you, Michael, and I was really happy to be able to be on your podcast, which I think is such a challenging thing to run. For those of you who are not in the business or haven't done one, it's a lot of work. So I give you kudos.
It's been a passion of mine for many years. And so I really understand when people say it's a passion project in terms of whatever they're doing in their lives, because I don't get paid for this. Some would say to me it's part of my it's part of my marketing or whatever, but I also don't generate an enormous amount of leads that would also pay for this. And I say that because that's what truly makes it a passion of mine, is that while I've been doing it for 3 years, I don't care what comes out of it. If marketing comes out of it, fantastic. If leads come out of it, fantastic. If I end up making a killing on it in terms of sponsorships and advertisement and all the rest, awesome. Like, trust me, I'm not saying no to any of those things. All of those things I want, and I'm putting out in the universe as, come and get me when you're ready. But even if none of that ever happens, it's a passion. It's like, I'll still be doing this because I really just enjoy it. But to your point, there is a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes in order to get, the mics going and the camera going. As you know, we were just doing that. It's sitting on some books here. It's like I'm in a professional studio at iHeart and it's still sitting on some books here. So it's like, it doesn't matter where you end up. You're always going to be troubleshooting and trying to figure something out. And that's the thing, is like, you have to be passionate about it. Otherwise, you're not going to troubleshoot. You're just going to go, oh, well, forget it.
And I think, Michael, you're such a natural communicator. And I think wanting to communicate with people verbally and on camera makes so much sense. I mean, I think I actually grew up in the world of journalism. And the weird thing about journalism is it's all scripted. So I really have to work hard when I communicate publicly to not sound scripted, because it's sort of the natural, hi, I'm so-and-so and I'm out here doing so-and-so. And it's like, well, that didn't come out right. But, whatever the activity is, and you're just giving the story, and it's so different. It's such a different rhythm. It's such a different way of putting things. And that's why I know that you really appreciate the way Howie talks about stories, because storytelling is a gift. And I think that having the opportunity to tell one story, whether it's on a podcast, whether it's at Toastmasters, which I love. P.S. Anybody who doesn't do Toastmasters and wants to be a speaker of any sort, get on it. That is a great training ground. But having the opportunity to talk to people, it's I think it's like an art that if people are really good at it, you don't even know it's happening. It's just natural. And I give you kudos for doing that.
Ah, well, thank you. Yeah. And a little other plug for Toastmasters. I'm sure we'll be talking about it a lot. Not just a training ground, but also a great place to practice. I use it for myself. I've been a Toastmaster now for 7 years, probably 8 years. And Howie, I think, is like 12 years. Howie and I have different, I think, goals with Toastmasters, and I don't think that I know that. Howie's there, I think, from a learning perspective and from a growth perspective of being able to share and present and do what he does, and he does it so great. And for me, I joined Toastmasters because I knew I wanted to be a keynote or a public speaker, a paid public speaker, and now I'm living in that dream, which is awesome and amazing. But I always had that goal. And so when we look at Toastmasters, it's a great place for salespeople, for business people to learn the skills of public speaking and to put them a little bit into practice. And what we see as Toastmasters is that those kind of people, they learn a little bit, they get better at it, and then they leave, which is fine because they've gotten to what they've gotten what they need out of the program and out of the club.
Right.
For people like you and me who are constantly going on stages and doing workshops and speaking in places, it's a great place to practice and rehearse some of the things that we're working on. So for instance, I'm doing a keynote very soon, a 60-minute keynote. And in all honesty, it's my first 60-minute keynote ever. And so it's so cool. What I've been doing at Toastmasters is we only have 10-minute speaking portions when we sign up as a speaker. So what I've been doing is I've been signing up for that and doing 10-minute blocks. And what's cool is Howie always picks up as my evaluator because he knows what I'm trying to do. And so he gives me the evaluation based off of what I'm trying to, my goals of the talk. So it's been a great place also to practice as a seasoned speaker. And so I wanted to put that plug in there for it.
Oh, no, I will add to the plug, which is that I think a lot of people come to Toastmasters thinking they don't know how to speak. But there are a lot of people who should be in Toastmasters because they already are good speakers. And getting the feedback from people in real time is very valuable. And even people who are not natural speakers, they are often good editors or they good feedback because they're really concentrating on giving you sound response. The idea, that you can practice on an opportunity where people are literally listening to everything you're saying in a very finite way really helps, because I think a lot of us have filler words, filler phrases that gets taken out. You learn to speak slower. You learn to think on your feet. So even my plug is, even if you are a good speaker, absolutely go to Toastmasters, because you're really refining what it is you do. And then you have people like Michael and like Howie who really understand that you're there to work on some really important things to you and then get the feedback that you need so you can succeed. It's a testing ground as much as a learning place.
Yeah. And something else that you said that I want to stay on for a second here is also, so Toastmasters motto is something about where leaders are made, or leaders for tomorrow or future. It has something to do with leaders of tomorrow. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, nothing about speaking, right?
Which is interesting, because as you were talking about the evaluation or evaluating someone, which is part of the Toastmaster thing, is evaluating someone's speech, is that I love what you said about maybe not being a seasoned speaker, but giving an evaluation because you're listening to the finer points. That's where the leader is made. And here's what I mean by that. In that moment of being an evaluator, you're judging yourself, and in a good way. I'm using judgment of yourself in a good way here. You're judging yourself. You're saying, I'm not a professional speaker, or I'm not at their level yet, let's say, right? But you're still giving feedback that's helping them get better and do better. And here's the leadership part, I think, for everyone to hear, is that a leader doesn't need to be the best at everything to be able to give feedback to help others improve. Because, and that's like essentially what leadership is. It's helping your team and the people that you're inspiring become better at what they do. And so if you're there to become a better public speaker, and part of what you're doing is evaluating somebody who might be at a different level than you, your evaluation matters, because you might be seeing things that they don't see or hear, and giving that to them so that they can excel. And I think that right there is part of that leadership track that we're talking about at Toastmasters, and also right here on the podcast.
1000%. I agree with that. I think that leadership is really about reaching down and pulling people up so that they can be their best. The training that I had, a lot of it was in radio, but a lot of it started in CNN in Atlanta, and we were just peons. But the way you would raise up into the company was to have somebody just ahead of you reach their hand down and pull you up. And that's actually kind of a traditional thing for media, is that people definitely bring people along. And that, to me, is a real leader, because it's selfless, right? You're looking to grow the other person as well as to do better things for yourself. So I think absolutely right about Toastmasters. And I ended up going from officer in the club to officer in the region. I personally, actually, I don't know if you ever got to do these, but the contests, which are
I've done too.
They're like crazy getting out on the ledge kind of thing. But I got to actually MC a couple and really get to see people going through it and not be the one going up on stage for that reason. So it was much more free and comfortable. But it really is an interesting process to watch people grow and take on the want of helping others. And I think that's one of the things we need to be thinking about when we're doing business, is it's not just about us, right? It's not just about how we're doing. Even if you don't have a team with you per se, like in real estate, there are a lot of teams, but even if you don't have a team, you still should be looking to elevate other people, because they're in your industry and you want them to do better so that you can do better. And I think that is something that's so relevant, and Toastmasters is incredibly helpful with that. So there are just so many aspects. So I plug it big, even though I haven't done it for a while, just time constraint wise, but it's a little bit of an unknown and a bit of a secret. But if you get a chance, rock on to a meeting. There are plenty of public ones, and it's very cool.
Yeah, I mean, you could always check out mine, the Duchess Toastmasters, and we also meet via Zoom. So that's our final plug for Toastmasters. Not that we, I mean, it's not. The thing is we've gotten so much from it, right? And so we want others to hear
Yes.
about it. And I like that you said like little secret, because you're right. Every once in a while, I'll hear a keynoter or a public speaker or a figure say something, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, and I learned that at Toastmasters." I'm like, "Oh yes," and it is rare, but that's what makes it so cool, like that gem, like that diamond in the rough. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Speaking of diamonds in the rough and the Diamond District, you're a real New Yorker, and and I'm saying this intentionally because
Thank you.
so many people are like, "Oh, I'm a New Yorker," or "I'm from New York," and I'm definitely one of those who says I'm a New Yorker. I'm from New York, right? And it's
Right.
because I'm part of the five boroughs. I'm from Queens, and the
From the
Bronx,
boroughs,
and the
from the Bronx, from Queens, the
uh,
boroughs.
that's right, from the borough. Right. There's my non-Toastmaster. As soon as I go back to the city, I lose all my Toastmaster learning. Uh, but the boroughs are very different than Manhattan.
Yeah.
And you grew
Yeah.
up in Greenwich Village, and so I am so curious on what growing up in Manhattan was like.
Super different than I imagine it's happening now. But it was really, really interesting. I grew up with a single mom, and a lot of my friends had that. And we all went to a school called Little Red Schoolhouse, which was really a hippie school. I mean, it was sort of the advanced thinking about how kids learn, which is through play and through their particular kind of intelligence, right? So we had these amazing teachers who just brought out our creativity. And as a whole, we were very independent kids. Even though we were really tied into this amazing school community, we had way more freedom than, for example, our children have, especially in the suburbs. We were walking to school by 8. And that was, down 6th Avenue. We were taking buses and subways. And by the time we were 10, we were done with school before the public school kids, and we would be at the movies, whatever opened, we were there first. So we had a lot of freedom. And what was really great about it, and I think the big takeaway, Michael, is by living somewhere like New York and growing up, you start to appreciate how wonderful people's differences are, because you're constantly coming into some sort of relationship. And I don't mean that in some romantic way. I mean, you are constantly coming into some sort of discussion, store, situation with people who are in theory different than you, but there's like a humanitarianism about New York and the way we grew up. It was sort of like, if we're all not the mugger, then we're all together. We're all on the same side. Like, we're all strap hanging and using the subway and just trying to get to work or school. And I don't know if it's that way right now. I think that it's definitely, there are less striations of maybe socioeconomic opportunities in the city right now. But for us, it was really a mix of people. It was everyone from doctors' kids to single moms who were in the art field. We had some cool people, like Bob Dylan's kid was in my class, and there was always some wonderful musician. We grew up on Free to Be You and Me because one of the moms had written a lot of lyrics. I mean, it was very, very cool. And but we didn't really know that in a good way, right? We didn't know that we were supposed to treat anyone differently just because they had a different skin color or a different anything, background, anything. It didn't matter. We had sort of this weird bliss about it, where it took until we were much older to understand that it was unique for us to not be judging people by who they are and what their ethnicity is, or what their background is, what their skin color is, what their culture or religion is. That really took a while to understand, until I went to a really high-end prep school. And I say that because it was really much more homogeneous, and it was definitely for a lot of rich kids, and the goal was to get you to college. And that was such a different situation than being amongst kids who are just being themselves. And so that was like, it was really cool. And the great thing about it is, when I say I'm from New York, and people, I don't have to be like, do you know where that is? Have you ever heard of it?
Yeah, the only thing you have to say is New York City, and everybody knows exactly where it is. So it's pretty neat. And I wanted, just for everybody, you said strap hangers, and it's so funny because it's like unless you're from the city, you really don't know what that is of like being on a subway or being on a bus and hanging on to those. So that's one thing. And the other thing I want to bring up is you mentioned the socioeconomic. Not exactly sure of the decade that you were, growing up there in, and you don't have,
Oh,
you don't have to share. You don't have to share it.
well, that,
There wasn't so much of a distinction between the wealthy and the poor, and now it's like if you're from the city, you're either one or the other. It's really hard to be a middle class person living in the city these days, and so I think that changed the way that you were able to enjoy it. I mean, I know when I was growing up, so for me, it would have been like the 90s, going into the city or into Manhattan or whatever, it was a very different feeling than I think it is today. It's today it feels very touristy,
mm,
or it feels either touristy or I don't belong. It's like one or the other almost. It's kind of weird.
I agree. I mean, we were living large in South Orange, and we sort of went, wow, we can live in a very expensive home, but there is no way we could afford something in New York City. How weird is that? To have come from New York, and we moved from Brooklyn when we had a 17-month-old. But I agree. I am a child of the 70s into the 80s, so it was a completely different time.
Yeah.
But I think again, we took things for granted. I mean, I remember a birthday where I was walking down 57th Street and Dustin Hoffman just passed by, like no big deal. Which for many of this audience, they may be like, whatever. But at the time, it was
Yeah.
like Dustin Hoffman. And another birthday, I was walking down 7th Avenue, and gosh, we were talking about, I think, meeting people randomly who are celebrities, which again, for people younger, probably is not a big deal, but like it was a big deal then. And we were walking down the street talking about it, and we heard this voice say, yeah, it's really cool when you see people who are famous. And it was Hall and Oates. It was John. It was Oates. No, Hall, right? The tall blonde
I
one.
I don't know them. I know that I worked at a place in Pauling, and they lived right down the road from there. They actually have a
Yeah.
bar right there in
Well,
Pauling.
I think it was Hall, and he was pretty on himself. He was like, yeah, it's so cool when you see famous people. The thing is, he was the least cool to us, because one of the things that was really interesting is, I mean, our school was such a mix, and we loved R&B. So like kind of whiter popper culture was not our jam at all. So we literally like screamed and ran away because we thought it was the funniest, least cool thing ever. And I feel kind of bad, because if he ever heard that I feel like we dinged his ego by running away. But
Mm.
anyway, it was, it was that kind of thing. You just sort of never knew what was coming. And in a good way, you're able to adapt. And I think that is one of the reasons that I love, for example, what you and I do. When you're public speaking, even though you know what you're going to say, you don't know what the situation is going to be. Something's going to happen. The camera's going to fall. The mic's not going to work. Anything can happen. And I think it's really valuable. Again, if you haven't grown up like this, find somewhere like Toastmasters. It's really valuable to be able to adapt.
Mm.
And I think that adaptability is one of the things that I'm most proud of from being a New Yorker, because my mom's goal was to say, I want you to be able to walk into Joe's bar, and I want you to be able to walk into the White House.
Mm.
And I was like, that is very cool. You're right. I want to hang out with everybody, and given whatever the situation is. And it's one of the things I love about public speaking. It's one of the things I love about real estate. You meet the gamut of people, and how cool is that?
Yeah, and it's so funny, the adaptability piece. So for our audio listeners, I'm tooling around here with my camera as you're saying that. My camera started flickering, and I'm like, all right, I got to switch over to a different camera here. So and that's it. We just adapt and kind of have to move forward. I think that's such a great lesson for anybody who's looking to enhance their speaking career, become a public speaker or a keynoter, is that you have to be able to think on the fly and adapt to the current situation. I remember I was attending a conference, and the keynoter was on stage, and she was speaking, and she kept sniffling and rubbing her nose, sniffling and rubbing her nose. And eventually, I want to say about 5 or 10 minutes into the keynote, she just stopped talking and just said, "Excuse me, can you grab me a tissue or a napkin or something? I really
Yeah.
need to blow my nose. And she got one. She said, "Excuse me, everyone." She blew her nose. She took care of it, and she continued on for the next 40 minutes in her keynote. And because I knew what I wanted to be at the time, I always
Yeah.
hung around after keynotes at conferences to try to speak with the speaker. And so
Yeah.
she gave me about an hour of her time after she spoke. We sat together at a table, and I was asking her about the business. This is going back 2018, I want to say. I was asking her about the business. I was asking her about do's and don'ts and places to go and learn, and different things like the NSA, National Speaker Association, and Toastmasters, and all the rest, right? And then she brought up, she goes, and you got to be adaptable, like just like you said. She's like, my allergies are driving me crazy today, and I knew they were gonna act up. I was hoping they wouldn't act up. I was hoping I can get through my whole talk without them acting up, and sure enough, they did. She goes, I thought I brought tissues with me up on stage. I didn't, and sure enough, I needed one. And she goes, you know what? I had to just stop what I was doing and ask for it because we're human
Yeah.
beings up there. And I think that when we think about adaptability, that's the part that we forget is we're human beings. So whether it's speaking on stage, running an organization, being a leader somewhere in your community, we're all human beings and we're all just trying to figure it out as we go along. And so
Absolutely.
if we could live in the moment and realize nothing's perfect and, I need help, how can we move on from this? It'll come.
Witness your camera and my lighting. It's never gonna be perfect. But I think that's so absolutely true. When I was growing up, and I clearly am a little bit older than you, but when I was growing up, all the advertisements on TV were like, buy this, gling. And that was sort of the joke about the Orbit gum. Do you remember? She kind of went, gling.
Right. And the teeth light up and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, everything was very, very scripted. And I think that's such a refreshing thing about our culture now, that there are a lot of things. Maybe we had to swing to the other side to do reality TV. But I think somewhere in the middle is people being genuine. And we're not asking people to have bad grammar. We're not asking people to have filler words or filler sentences. However, humanity on a stage is real and it's not a play, so they don't need to know exactly what to say. And if they're reacting to the situation and the audience, I mean, to me, that's endearing. And also it makes me feel really more connected to that person. I know that my coach always says to us, like, the audience is with you. You have to remember that they don't want you to fail. They're sitting there. They don't want to be bored. They don't want you to fail. They want you to be there to entertain them or interest them or inspire them. And so when we show people they're human, I think we just become even more in relationship with them, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're spot on there, right? Is like, I always train on that too for everybody that is in one of my public speaking sessions. I asked the audience. I'll ask them outright. I'll just say, do you want me to fail up here? And they kind of look at me funny. I'm like, do you want me to just completely forget what I have to say and completely flub my words and totally be embarrassed up here? And they start understanding what I'm asking, and they all start, no, of course not. And I'm like,
Right.
exactly. And when you come up here, because usually in my public speaking courses, which I'm sure you've attended your own and they do this for you, is I want you to come up here. And so when you come up here, realize that everybody is doing the same for you. They don't want you to fail.
That's right.
I don't want to miss out on the opportunity to speak a little bit about your journalism career. I know that kind of is what catapulted you into real estate, and then of course is what you're drawing on in terms of your speaking career today. And so I'm very interested in what that was like, and what you mentioned a little bit about it before about getting pulled up. Where did it start? Where did the journalism career start, and what did it do for you?
That's so interesting. Thank you, Michael, for asking about that. So I actually came from a family of journalists, believe it or not. My grandfather was the editor of what was a very big paper years ago called the Newark News. He ended up getting transferred to Washington, D.C. as the bureau chief, and then went into government and worked with Kennedy and Johnson. But in the meanwhile, my uncle was working for the big station in Washington. So I always knew people who were in media. And I think it was sort of a natural move but I was in Boston sort of going, what am I going to do? I graduated way back late 80s. I graduated from Smith. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I had a really good friend from elementary school who was in Atlanta. And he said, come on down. Like, I'll put your resume on the table at the desk of somebody wonderful. He did. We had a great interview. Went down. Anyway, living in Atlanta, that's a whole different thing, working overnights. But what it really showed me was how much goes into information dissemination. Like, it's a lot of work with a lot of people constantly. And somehow in my youth, it didn't make a good connection that CNN 24-hour news meant people had to be there all day long, including us peons who were there all night long. But the great thing was a lot of us went on. I actually ended up going back to my home state and going into radio, which is a medium that any speaker could really appreciate. You never have to get dolled up. You never have to wear makeup. And you get to really meet a lot of people. I was doing like rock and roll news, which was super fun, and then local politics. I think the thing, Michael, that's really interesting about the way you carry things through, there's always been a commonality of what I like. I love to write. I love to meet people. I love to connect with people. And that's been the same, whether it's media, and then I moved into public relations, and then I was in graduate school, and then I was a stay-at-home mom, but I was still doing all these things that had similar ideas, leading groups or coaching or writing newsletters or any of that. It all sort of made sense. And I think if you are looking at what you're going to do, it's really valuable to think about what the things are that you love, because they will carry you through no matter what it is you're doing. And it's the same, as I go into real estate, I love video, I love media. And while that's marketing as opposed to prospecting, it's got this amazing place in that industry as well.
Mm. Well, I mean, I'd argue that it is part of prospecting. I think that we are living in a time of really great opportunity to be able to use our talents. Maybe I'm speaking to the we of the people like you and me who are willing to put our faces out there and our voices out there. And so when, excuse me?
It's terrifying.
Oh, it's terrifying?
Where you like it, right? On some level, it's like being judged, but yes, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. I don't think of it as terrifying, and I'm surprised that you even think of it as terrifying. I think you come across really, really well spoken and confident. But I guess we all have little fears inside. But where I'm going with this is that we have an opportunity with social media and the way that people are taking in information now, that by being able to use your broadcast voice and being able to use your image and your face and video, you can use it to prospect. And the other thing is that, like you said before, which is growing up in the 70s and 80s or even early 90s, where commercials were very commercial, like you knew it was an advertisement, you knew it was a commercial, right. And going into today where it's really information and education is what sells, it really brings out the people in us of who you and I are, or whoever is listening right now in terms of being an entrepreneur, in that you can use video and audio to educate people, and at the same time it's a form of marketing, but it is prospecting. Yes. Like, I mean, I said it before, this podcast doesn't really generate leads, but if I wanted it to, it probably could. If I decided to position it that way, I just don't position it that way.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think the thing we're very lucky about social media is that it allows people to know us. And so if we're willing to be, and it's really hard, I don't think I'm great at it, but I think there are a lot of people who are, they're willing to be honest and vulnerable. And the vulnerable side of them, I think, is, again, what really appeals. They're human, what they go through, depending on what their field is. I personally love that. Like, those are the people I love. And it does help. I think you're right in terms of, cultivating your tribe, right? Like, you attract the people who are attracted to you in terms of what you think or how you feel or how you speak or how you present yourself. And what appeals to somebody might not appeal to somebody else, but it's sort of like, it's not so much an audition. It's more like I feel like social media is sort of like being a pen pal. Like, you don't know them, but you know them. And I think there are a lot of realtors, for example, that get really lost in what it is they need to do, and they forget to show who they are. They're very busy showing, just sold and just listed. And yeah, that's great. And it demonstrates that they're capable of their actual business. But who are they? Like, there are millions of real estate agents in the country. And so to differentiate yourself, that's really the chore, or the task rather, um, that somebody can use social media for, to really get people to understand. And it's all different, right? Like, I'm going to talk to people about my experience as a mom or as a homeowner or whatever. And somebody may be a young couple, and that may be a totally different appeal, or they're looking at me like sort of an auntie, who can help them through things. So I think it's just a really wonderful way to get some sort of perspective on who people are.
Yeah, it really is. And I'm interested in the judgment part for you. I feel it too. And so I'm just interested on what your thoughts are on it, because like you said, you're cultivating your own tribe and the people who I would think support you. And so therefore it gives you the opportunity to be more real. But I think maybe this is really where my question lies for you, is for those listening right now who are looking to get into, let's say, a real estate field or an insurance field, or one of those service type of industries where getting to know the person is more important than the product, because there's so many products out there and there's so many people selling the product, that it's really about you and what are your unique qualities and who are you as a person. What do you think is the best way to maybe overcome some of that feeling of judgment in order to put yourself out there and be vulnerable in social media?
Well, I think probably, and this probably rings true for a lot of people, that not everybody is really genuine on social media. And that was one of the things that just made me say, ugh, I don't care what you had for breakfast. And I really am kind of jealous that you're in Italy for the third week in a row. You know what I mean? And you're like, you're just showing me the best of your world. And that's great. And that's wonderful. But like, that doesn't do anything. I don't really know you now. I think that people need to be thinking in terms of how they are creating a relationship with somebody and using social media. And I think the thing that's hardest about that is because, like, you get the opportunity when somebody is on social media to critique every single part of them, the way we do with celebrities. She's to this, or he's to that, or she's got that makeup, or we're very good at doing that. But I think that the challenge for people in service fields is to use it differently, not just to say, like, look at me, I'm so great, but actually to turn it around, because the best service providers are really never doing it for themselves. I mean, yeah, we're trying to make money and we have a career, but when you're really doing your job to help somebody else, I think that's what shines through, and that's what's important, and that's what's valuable. And sure, there are going to be people who make a lot more money than somebody else who's just doing it relationship by relationship. I get that. But is that sort of the thing you want to leave the earth having done? I mean, for me, it's more like the opportunity to grow relationships on a regular basis. And I think that if people get the opportunity to not judge harshly, but to assess you, then that's pretty cool. That's actually pretty cool, and cuts down the time you need to waste with somebody who's not into what you're into, or not, jiving with your vibe. So
yeah. I just realized it's so funny. As we're talking about this, I'm looking at my other camera that I've turned off, and it's like I need to look at this camera over here. I realized it like while I was talking, so I'm sorry. I wasn't making eye contact with the lens.
Well, it's so hard to do. Believe me, you're doing a great job.
But it's what's made me think of it is, as we're talking about social media and talking to camera and all that stuff. So I'm like, wait a second, I haven't been talking to the camera. Which is really talking to you, to our audiences, and
Absolutely.
and there you go. But I want to go back to your radio days. So you were on the radio. You were doing. You were having fun. You were kind of like living out whatever it was that you enjoyed doing there. And then you made a shift into real estate. And I'm interested in that transition period for you. What was going on for you? What were some of the questions, or maybe some of the life events that were happening that made you decide to shift?
Sure. So first of all, radio, super fun. You make absolutely no money. I think I literally made $9,000 a year. I was under the poverty line. I was having a lot of fun because I got to go to almost every concert. Like I literally went to Lollapalooza when it was the first year or the second year. It was amazing, right? So there were perks. That was fun. And then I moved back to New York City when I met my ex-husband. But I had a big transition, and that was actually a sort of an interesting awakening for me. Being a kid who grew up in an apartment, we bought a house, and then I realized that I loved the process of buying a house, making it better, bringing all its wonderful characteristics out. So I ended up actually doing that as a homeowner several times over. We had 5 houses out of 22 years in the course of the time since 1998 when we moved to Maplewood, and we stayed in Maplewood, then South Orange, Summit. We really moved around, and we kind of enhanced these houses and then brought them to the market. That clearly is a good foundation for being a real estate agent. And I had a very good friend who was in real estate locally, who was doing really well, and was like, you know both sides, come help me. And I was like, no freaking way. I don't like realtors.
Oh, wow.
It took her like 6 months. And then I was like, all right, fine, I'll do it for you. And took the test, started the work, and went, oh, yeah, I like this. This is good. I'm in it. So it took a little while. It took a little while for me to sort of get my groove about appreciating the field. Because like every field, there are people who aren't maybe as ethical, or they're not doing their job in the way that you would hope they would do it. And that happens all the time everywhere. So maybe we're just more of a microcosm because what we do is not regular, right? People used to buy a house every 5 to 7 years, and now it's like every 13 years. So you're in the middle of something, you do it more often than the people who you're helping. They haven't done it for a while. It's like Education City, as well as helping them through something, as well as being their financial advisor, as well as being their moral support, as well. It's got a lot of complexity to it. So I think that it was almost a natural fit, and the writing, the performance, all those things go hand in hand as long as you're being genuine about it. But it's like everything's new on a daily basis. The board gets erased every time you start with a new client, whether they're a buyer or seller, because you don't know what's coming. And for some people, that's really uncomfortable. And I would say the majority of people I talk to in real estate love that. They love that. They're like, no day is the same.
Yeah, no day is the same for most entrepreneurs as well. One of the questions I'm always curious on is transferable skills, and so I'm curious on what do you see as or were or are transferable skills that you had from going from journalism and radio into real estate?
Yeah, thank you. I think a lot of it was because I had my own video company with some friends, so I really know, like, and understood
This is
video.
why it's so weird to me that you said you're uncomfortable with video. I was like, wait a second, I was completely thrown off when you said that.
Well, no, I just think it's sometimes terrifying to get up and realize, if you just stop for 1 second and think people are judging like your teeth, your hair, your clothes, whatever it is.
While my eye is half swollen shut from a sty.
Exactly. I mean, we're human, right? So I think that part is terrifying, but if you can sort of breathe through and understand it and talk to people like you, so we have a good rapport and also really enjoy having a conversation. It makes it easier. But yeah, I had a lot of video experience, so I love that. I think that because I had been a Toastmaster, it made it easier to do things like give a listing presentation because I wasn't so completely tongue-tied. I have been involved in a lot of the organizations around real estate, like Women's Council. They've been we had a lot of opportunities to talk and speak. And I think it was very comfortable for me to make a transition because there's skills that were innate and there was things that I already liked to do and had some skills with. But believe you me, there's plenty to learn. There may be a different day every day in entrepreneurship and real estate, but there's also learning something every day because God knows we're human and we make mistakes and you get to learn on the job.
Right on the fly there. Yeah. And so on this public speaking train, in that you were a Toastmaster, and then obviously you're moving into the real estate, and then you have these listing things, these listing presentations that you have to give. It gives you an edge. The Toastmasters and then that radio, it gives you an edge. What was it like for the people who didn't have the training, and how did you help them?
Actually, I'm so excited because I think you said in my bio, just been made one of the new coaches for a rollout
Yeah.
program with the company. It's like agent to agent coaching. The agents who are coaching get coached. And it's pretty exciting to be able to get people excited about their business and help them recognize that it is a business, right? You understand you're the CEO of your business, right? And nobody can make it better or worse than you. You're the one who can do the work or not do the work and figure out what your goals are and figure out ways to get there. But it takes really looking at a lot of aspects of yourself and what you want out of life. And I think that's actually a really cool thing about being in something in sales. It's not about learning how to be salesy. I think it's learning about how to be a business owner. It's about learning how to help others. It's about learning how to be better than you were. And I found that amazing. Like, I thought that was so cool how much education there is around at least my industry. And I think a lot of entrepreneurial sales industries have that, which is kind of cool, right?
Yeah, and I mean, especially in real estate where you do have to give a lot of presentations, I know that, it's very challenging for a lot of newcomers into the field. And, having a coach, having a mentor, having somebody help you through that, I think makes it a lot easier and a lot better for you because, like you said, when you're in sales, I mean, it doesn't matter if you work for a big corporation and you have a manager and all this other stuff. So obviously real estate's a little bit different, although, there's management and all that, all those other levels. The point that I'm getting at here is that you're running your own business in sales. You have to
Yeah.
figure out how to manage your time, and you have to figure out how to make sales and close deals and market yourself and do all the rest. And at the same time, you have to be a good presenter, a good speaker. And I think, some of the other stuff might come naturally. Maybe you rose through the ranks and you know your product really well and you are able to get into that position very naturally. The public speaking part is typically where people start having a lot of fear and anxiety, and it can hold them back from getting to the next level. And the next level could be closing another deal. And so what
Yeah.
I'm interested in is in your coaching, what are some of the ways that you help some of these newer salespeople deal with some of these public speaking anxieties that they might have?
Sure. I mean, I think that that's very true, right? The old adage that people are more afraid to publicly speak than do anything else, which I don't know if that's really true. I think video has made a lot of people more comfortable, but they were sort of afraid of that because they felt like it was public speaking. But with agents who are not quite used to understanding that their business is their own, one of the things we really work on is figuring out what their goals are. And I say that because we sort of fantasize, right? We all think, oh, I just want to make more money, or I just want to lose. It's sort of the same thing. I just want to lose weight. But if you don't know where you want to go, how are you going to create the actions that are going to get you there? So one of the big things that I do is work with my coachees to go through a budget, but it can be a fantasy budget. It can be everything from here's what are your living expenses? What do you like to do? Oh, you want to travel? Where do you want to travel? Oh, you want to go to Kenya for a safari? Okay, how much is that going to cost? Oh, by the way, no, it's not going to cost $500. It's going to cost thousands and thousands, but we're going to put that down. By the end of it, it shows them where they want to be and why. And that, I think, is the best thing that anyone can figure out in order to do their business. It's either because the why is they want people to be better because of the business, or the other aspect for them as business owners is they want to be able to understand why they're getting up in the morning, why they're suffering through all the rejection when they're calling people, or why they're going to do it all over again tomorrow. If you don't understand why you're doing it, it's really, really hard to do. And I will say that for me, it's much easier, as it usually is, to be an editor, i.e. coach. I'm not necessarily great at telling myself, get up again because you want to go to Paris 3 times a year. I'm not good at that, but I am good at reminding people that they should be good at that.
Yeah, sometimes that's why we all need coaches. I mean, it's so funny.
Absolutely.
I'll sit with my coach Merritt, and I'll go over things that I've literally just coached somebody else on about myself. I'll literally
Mhm.
go over things and I go, I just had this conversation with someone else, or she'll say something to me that I just said to someone else. But I mean, that's why we all need coaches. That's why it's so important that we never think that, our growth is done, because it just never is if you're striving for more. Um,
Absolutely.
Today you are striving for more. You
Yes.
are a speaker now, and you're putting yourself out there to speak at conferences and to speak on different stages. And I'm curious about that role and what that venture looks like for you today.
Well, so I've been very lucky, and I know we both talked about there are several really great training programs. I know you're in one. I feel strongly I'm in one. I'm actually in one called Mic Drop Workshop with Jess Elkstrom, and it's really about and focused on getting women on stages. And um, I laughingly say, there are a lot of people who are hiring male, pale, and stale instead of female speakers, and they might somebody's called them manels instead of panels because there are a lot of men. And no offense to any of you guys, but it is a balanced world, and there's so many women in business. It's vital to get their energy, because it's not always about like a particular subject matter that's only important to women. But anyway, so I feel very lucky that I'm in the opportunity to step into something that there's a hole in, that there's a niche, right? But my speaking is a little bit different. Like you, I am working on a keynote, a consistent keynote, and I feel like it's kind of a funny subject, and I have to figure out like all the corporations who are going to appreciate this. But I talk about quitting, and I talk about reframing the idea of quitting, because when we hear quitting, we think failure, loser. And I was like, oh man, like I feel like such a loser. I stopped doing that, or I stopped doing that, and I tried that, but I'm not doing it anymore. And I really took till I heard that quitting has been researched enough to understand that it's valuable.
Mm.
If you are going forward doing something that's not getting you somewhere, why are you doing it? Like, why are you continuing things and not making room for things you really want to have, do, see, whatever it is? It's like the sunk cost fallacy in business of, I put all this money in, I got to keep going. Well, if you put $1 million in and you stop, that's all you've lost. If you keep going and it still fails, now you're 2 million in. And so I think that it's been really, really fun to figure out something that is unconventional, but ultimately, I hope helpful. Because
Mm.
I think a lot of us, again, back to that judgment, feel like if you're not seeing things through, right? Have we all had that parental, you must go because you must see things through? On some level, that's very, very true. You can't just cop out on things. However, in your life, if things are not making room for the things that you really want, why are you doing them? I just really question people, and I urge them to question themselves, not just jobs or relationships, but really think about, like, how are you going to get to your goals and your purpose if you're completely going in a different direction?
Mm. Yeah, I think when you think about quitting, it's if what you're doing is no longer making you happy, whatever it is, like you said, relationship, job, if it's no longer making you happy, then why are you doing it? And I think that's a big difference between it's challenging and you're quitting. I think the difference
Yes.
between the two is that there are things that we love and that we're passionate about, and they get challenging, they get hard, and they make us want to quit because it's so hard, and we just don't know, how am I going to continue? How will I push forward? How will I get through this? How will I pay another bill? How will, this relationship last? But you love it, and you're passionate about it, and you would do anything to continue. Well, then that's a different type of quitting than what you're speaking to. It sounds like what
Yeah.
you're speaking to is you don't love it. You're not passionate about it. In fact, chances are, you probably got into whatever it is that you're into because somebody else told you should. You probably didn't get into it for all the right reasons. I think of, some of the jobs I've had, and a lot of the times the reason was because of the salary. It was, oh, they're offering me X amount of dollars, and that's why I'm going there. It doesn't matter what the product was that they were selling, that I was selling, or that they were offering me to sell. Doesn't matter what the product was, or where I'd be going, or what the job looked like. I didn't care about anything. I just looked at the salary. And so when things got hard, guess what? I would quit. Now, I want to make sure that people know this because this is important.
You're not a quitter and a loser, I know.
No. Yeah, you're right. I didn't quit. I got fired instead. And that's what I want to make sure is very clear, is that I quit on the job, and that's why I got fired. So very, very different. But what I'm saying here is that when you're into something that you don't care about, you quit. You just quit, because if you're in it for the money, or if you're in it for the fame, or for the, when I was just on a podcast recently for fitness, if you're in it for the six-pack abs, if you're in it for these superficial things, which we understand money's not superficial, but there's a certain number that really is. If you're in it for all of those reasons, well, then when things get hard, you're just going to quit. But, we talked about passion project. When you're in something because you love it, and money's no issue, or the way you look is no issue, or the fame or publicity you get from it is no issue. In other words, if it comes, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Well, then that's not the same type of quitting. We're talking about things get hard and challenging, and it's asking yourself, do I have more? And I think anybody who's a winner says, yeah, I got more in the tank. Brennan Burchard says, and I love this quote, is, you're stronger than you think. And I love that.
That is so true. And I think that's really what the message is that you have the right to lead your life. And, it's a misnomer. And when you think about it, like one of my favorite actors in the whole world is Harrison Ford, right? Harrison, I think, was like either a waiter or carpenter. I mean, he was doing something like that, which I am not negating it, but it is not Harrison Ford that we know. But he had to quit that in order to act, right? I mean, so everybody who's had success has had to quit something. And it doesn't mean necessarily it's negative. If somebody gets a great job at another company, yeah, they're quitting. That's one thing. But they had to stop one thing to move to the next. And I think that's the really important thing for people to understand, is that taking a lot of time with things that don't give you what you need, whatever that means, money or pleasure or satisfaction. We have a finite amount of time here on Earth. And so to take the time away from what you could be doing seems like a waste. And I felt like I wanted to make sure people knew that they weren't losers because they went in a different direction. They're simply going in a different direction, and that's okay. And hey, by the way, that next direction might not be right either, but they have to ping, like all around and get to the right place, right? You can't get to where you want to go if you don't try. And you might not succeed, but then that leads you, okay, I think of life as those wonderful flow charts. Like if you said yes, go here. If you said no, go here, right? So that's where we think about it. People don't like what they're doing. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we're going to go to the left. Okay, now you tried that and we like this part about it, but maybe not this. So now we're going to go to the right. If that makes sense, that's just the way I think people can give themselves some freedom to really find their purpose and enjoy as much as possible of their lives. And I say that, obviously, we all have things we have to do. So this is not a promotion of being irresponsible, but it's really the idea that you don't need to berate yourself for stopping something.
I think there's also, in terms of this conversation on quitting, a good reason to take a pause in your life, of taking that moment, that step back, whether it's quitting or being fired or leaving a job, however you want to position it or say it.
Yeah.
Taking a moment to gain clarity, because what made me think of saying this is when you're talking about that ping-ponging of job to job or bouncing around, and maybe that's not the right place and this isn't the right place. And a lot of that is almost wasted time because you're trying to find yourself. You're trying to find, well, who am I and what is it that I want to do? And really at the end of it is like, what impact do I want to leave on the world? And so if you're to think about this finite time, which you said, and I appreciate that, and you're thinking, okay, we do only have this finite time. Let's just say that we're extraordinary human beings and we live for 100 years. Let's just say we're extraordinary and we live for 100 years. Let's just call it that, right? Okay, so we're extraordinary, we live for 100 years. What is 100 years in terms of our planet's existence, in terms of our galaxy's existence? And I know this sounds like all woo-woo and crazy, but the truth is like, what made me really think of this is I watched these videos with my daughter, SciShow Kids. Shout out SciShow Kids. Please publish her question. She's been asking me about it. So if you're watching a SciShow Kids, please, Tenley has a question for you, and we emailed you. Answer her question. But anyway, we watched SciShow Kids. And what really put this in perspective for me is they focus on dinosaurs and they focus on space, which is always attractive to kids and adults like me. And in the dinosaur one, I didn't know this. I mean, maybe it was taught to me in school, but I missed this whole class. Maybe I was like absent for a month.
I missed a lot of classes.
And apparently there's like two different dinosaur ages. Of like, there was like this one dinosaur age, I think maybe there's three actually. I can't remember what they all were, but there's the Jurassic age, which is like in between. And there's another one that was before the Jurassic age and one that was after. And there's like hundreds of millions of years of dinosaurs, then like 50 million years of nothing, and then another 100 million years of something, another 100. We're talking 100 million years. And for humans, it's hundreds of millions of years till we start coming into an existence, right? And then from there to where we are now is only thousands of years. And it's like, wait a second, thousands of years. We are a blip, like we're lucky to be a blip, right? So back to the finite time, right? Yeah. If we have this finite time and we're a blip, then it's so vital that we live in truly who we want to be and the impact that we want to create in this moment. Because even if you are, a legendary, Achilles of some sort, right? Where your name will live on for thousands of years. It's going to disappear. You're not going to be here for millions of years, right? So what's the impact that you can create today? And here's where I'm going with this whole thing here, and that you're happy with. And so that's where that pause or that time of clarity is so important, is that it's not just the impact, it's that you're also happy in creating that impact. And so in quitting, in that moment, in that time, it gives you such a great opportunity to start searching, what impact do you want to create? And that fulfills you and that makes you happy. I know for me, I did the bounce around. And it wasn't until for me that I was done with it. And maybe it's a good opportunity to just share this. I've shared it once before on my podcast, but I think it'll be good for everybody here in this moment is I didn't quit. I quit in the job. And so therefore I was fired. And that happened to me multiple times over. And the last time that it happened to me, I was married, or I still am married. I was married. My wife, we had our first baby and my wife was pregnant. And now I had other people in my life that I had to share this with. When I was single and I got fired, it was like, I could tell anybody the story. I could tell anybody whatever, the banking industry or this, right? Now I got to tell my wife, and then I have my mother-in-law coming over, babysitting my child so that I and my wife can go to work. So there's a huge moment here of like, I better figure this shit out. Mm-hmm. And so what I did was I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. It took me years to ever tell anybody I ever got fired from any job, by the way. This is recent that I started being able to have the courage to tell people I actually was fired from all those jobs. But I was embarrassed. So what I did, and this is why this moment of clarity, and I think this story is important to everybody in this conversation, and maybe in your keynote, I don't know if this helps you.
I'm taking
is
notes.
take notes on this. What I did was I would make believe I would get dressed when my mother-in-law would come over to watch my daughter Denise. I'd get dressed and I'd make believe I was going to work. And I would go to a local hotel here in New Paltz called the Hampton Inn, and other hotels that I would go to, because I wasn't the only one, but that was the primary one that I remember vividly. I would go there and I had my Tony Robbins tapes. It was the first time that I really dove into personal development. And from 9 to 5, I was listening to personal development because I was done. I was done bouncing around. I wasn't going to find another job. I was like, I don't want to find another job. I don't want to just go career chasing and money chasing. I want to figure out Michael. Why am I constantly going on this roller coaster ride of, salesman of the year to failure, to quitting, to being fired? And it was through those personal development days of listening to Tony Robbins, putting the work into action, that I discovered what I wanted to become and the impact I wanted to create. And it still took many years to get to where I am today. That's 2017, I want to say 2016, 2017 is when that happened. But that is what put me on the path to start finding my passion and doing things like this and the work that I'm doing today. And so it was that moment, and that's what I want to go back to the quitting thing here in terms of taking a pause and finding yourself. It was that moment of taking that pause. Like, yeah, I didn't find myself right away, but you got to pause. You got to start really evaluating what matters in your life and why does it matter to you?
And you couldn't have gotten where you are now in terms of where you understand and know and love what you're doing if you didn't quit. And that's sort of my point, is that quitting needs to be redefined because it's really repositioning, or that's what it should be. Because I don't want it to seem like a luxury. I don't want it to seem like something that only people who are of a certain echelon or professional background or socioeconomic height can achieve. I think that it's really valuable that people understand that they're not, it's not negative. And that's the part that I think can really get people down in a way that makes them not able to go to the next step. If you're in a financially difficult situation, it's really hard to turn yourself. But maybe the quitting is quitting saying, I don't have the opportunities, or I don't have the money, or I don't, there's something that you're stopping. There's something that you're turning away from. There's something hopefully that you're turning towards. And I think that that's part of the challenge, right? We don't always know what we're turning towards. But if we turn away from things that are not serving us, I guess people would say, if it's not serving you, if it's not beneficial for, and again, I don't mean to give it the buzz of, oh, be irresponsible, but we have a general idea. If something's not serving us, it's probably not thus serving our spouses or our significant others or our children. It's not meant to be selfish. It's meant to be self-aware.
Yeah, it's like when you meet that person who's been in a job for 20 or 30 years and they're miserable, not just in the job, but at home. And that's where I think why your talk is so important, why your keynote is so important, because they're living a life. They've lived a life for 30 years where they were miserable, and therefore the people around them, their children, their families, their friends, were miserable in their company. And so I feel like your speech, your talk, your keynote is saving not just that person that's quitting, but their families. Because how many people have we met that are, the golden handcuffs where, well, I'm earning X amount and, I got to do it. I got to put food on the table. And it's like, amen, you got to do it. We get that. But, I think the people that you're speaking to, for the most part, and the people listening right now for the most part, have options. And sometimes taking that one step back or maybe 5 steps back is what propels you. I just heard this recently about the longbow. And I forget exactly the entire story. I think it was, I forget the whole story, but the longbow, it's a bow and arrow. And
Yeah.
it was a battle in it was a French battle that had occurred in a long time ago, and the bow mattered. And the
But not in the
reason,
dinosaur era,
no, it
long
wasn't
time ago.
dinosaurs. It wasn't dinosaurs. No dinosaurs involved in this. But it had to do with the longbow and why I think why the French were defeated. Doesn't matter who won the battle or not. But what I'm getting at here is it had to do with taking a longbow and that they were able to pull it back further than the other side because it was
Mm.
not just a bow and arrow, it was a long bow and arrow. And because they were able to pull it back further and angle it at 180 degrees, they had an advantage by being able to be more protected while firing their bow and arrow and while firing it at a further distance to hit the target and to win the war. And so when we think about with quitting, sometimes we have to go further back in order to catapult ourselves forward to be able to win in life.
Absolutely. And when you think about it, that's a great story about quitting because that's that's exactly what it can be. It can be a creative input because as a result of taking that step, they benefited, but they had to quit doing it the way they were doing it before, didn't they? They had to quit. They couldn't be doing it in a new way if they didn't quit. And that's the part about quitting that I talk about for corporate, because it's not about quitting your job. It's about figuring out how to do things differently. So you may not love something about your job, but is there something you can create that is a different direction that allows you to get more out of it or allows you to produce more? Or there are just so many aspects of it, but that's a great story. And that's exactly what it is. It's not failing. It's actually that discussion of failing forward, which I love.
I think
They hadn't tried,
too,
they would win.
I think too, because you bring up the whole responsibility piece. And I think something that's important in this moment of let's say looking for clarity or this moment of pause or this moment of transition for everyone listening is that you start setting yourself up for your next move. I think
Yeah.
when I quit, so I did actually finally quit my last job before I started on my entrepreneurial journey. I mean, I guess my entrepreneurial journey has always been a part of my life. I just never really paid attention to it as
Yeah.
significantly as when I quit my six-figure job. So since you put salaries out there, I'll share this with everybody. I literally went from making it was $9,657, I think it was my W-2 at the insurance agency I was working at when I was
Mhm.
recruited by the top 5 broker in the country and earned my dream salary of over $120,000. And I was at that company, and while I was there, I knew I wanted to start my own insurance agency. I knew I wanted to start my own company and be a true entrepreneur and be standing on my own. And about 6 months in, I was already working on what my agency was going to look like. And about 7 to 8 months in is when I started thinking about quitting. And it wasn't, I did go an entire 12 months. And the reason was because my wife had asked me if I could just stay there 12 months, it would make her happy. But
Yes, yeah.
around 7 to 8 months was when I started feeling like, all right, I'm ready to quit. And it was because I I knew what I was going to do next. And so what I'm sharing with everyone here is I quit my dream job. I quit the salary. I made the thumbs up. I quit the salary that I had always dreamed of. I quit my dream job. I was working for the biggest broker in the country. I had all the support I ever wanted. I was selling the biggest programs, premiums that I ever could dream of. And I quit it, but I quit it with a plan. And I think that if given an opportunity or given the time to be able to think of what your next steps are, it's going to benefit you when you're thinking about quitting.
Absolutely. And again, maybe I'm not explaining it well because I agree you don't want to ping from one thing to the other randomly, but I do think it's much like an investigation, right? If you think of a police investigation, they might go because they got a lead to go to a particular restaurant, right? And the restaurant says, no, 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 that's not us. That's the other one. Okay, they go to the other one and they find out there that it has to do with that particular staff. They wouldn't have known that if they didn't go the first one. Then they go to the staff and they find out something about somebody who knows somebody, and that's who they go to. So it's like, it's quitting to me is really figuring out, deciphering what works. So you may quit and you may not land where you think you want to be, but you will eventually if you keep asking. I think, and I'm probably not going to be able to tell you who I'm quoting, but I've heard that it's only 24 questions till you, from being a billionaire, you're 24 questions from being a billionaire. And I don't know if that's exactly true, but it's that point where it's like, am I going to go this direction? That didn't work. Okay, I'll go the other direction. I'm going to go this direction. Nope, that didn't work. Let me try another direction. But because you're building on something, you get to where you want to be.
Yeah, and I think like to what you were saying, I don't think you said anything wrong in terms of like the quitting and pinging back and forth and trying to, and discovering. You know, from I'm just maybe just giving a different perspective. I want to say that I think in line with what you're saying in terms of that pinging around and maybe going restaurant to restaurant 24 questions away, it's very similar to like Michael Jordan's "I've failed" or "I've missed," 10,000 shots. I forget what the number was, but it's really about, like you said, failing forward. It's really about taking risk and taking chances and realizing that, in the corporate space, you're quitting because you're looking for another job, or you're looking for the right job or the right career. In the entrepreneurial space, it's quitting because you want to start your business. So it's quitting, and not that it'll be successful. I mean, my insurance business is nowhere near what I had put in my business plan. In fact, I don't know exactly where it'll end up. We're in our third year, but we're not anywhere near where we need to be a successful insurance agency. So, just because I had this great plan and did all the air quotes right things and quit and was following my passion and was following my dream, it doesn't mean it'll end up good either, or like fantastic either. It just means that I quit and I did something, I went for it, and that's the impact. I'm living out my dream, the happiness, the fulfillment, and maybe I'm successful at it, maybe I fail at it. What have I learned from it, and where do I go to next? And I think that's the pinging that you're talking about, is where do I go to next?
Yeah, in a good way, right? You're like, oh, what's the world showing me that I go to next? I think you touched on a really good point. I call it, redefining quitting, but there's also redefining success amongst that, because the way you just explained it is the average person might have thought you made a successful move when you went to the company that had a great salary, but it wasn't the success that you wanted. You clearly wanted to be able to go and have the opportunity to grow your own business, and that makes you a success. You clearly wanted to be able to have some outlets that other people didn't. So doing a podcast makes you a success. And I think that those go hand in hand, because we define things really tightly. And then back to that judgment thing, we judge people really harshly. So yeah, I mean, Michael Jordan, he failed a lot, but he also won a lot. And that's really the important, right? You might fail, but if you fail 49% of the time and you win 51%, guess what? You won. You're successful, or you accomplished, or whatever it is.
Well, it's like you said too. It's like, what is your definition? I typically ask people that, like, what is your definition of success? Because our definitions are going to be completely different. Everyone's definition is going to be different. I just had somebody on recently on the show. His definition of success is a $100 million company. My definition is very different. Now, the lifestyle that he gets with the $100 million company, I'm like, let's go get it. But the work and the time he has to put in to earn and to get that $100 million company, I want no part of, because that's not my definition of success. I mean, we all want the fun car and the cool trips, like you said, the trips to Paris and all the different things. But we also have to realize that comes with something else. And is that what you want? So when we define, I think it's important that in that moment of pause, of quitting, is that define what success means for you, not what everybody else is telling you. Don't go to Google and ask what's success, or what Kat thinks, or what Michael thinks, or what anybody thinks. What do you think of success? Because that's going to define what your next moves are and what you really want. because I know that, Michael 10 years ago would have interviewed that person and said, $100 million company. I said, I want that. That's success. Not realizing that that means that I might be neglecting my family. I might be neglecting my health. I mean, he even admitted that. He said that building his last business, he neglected his health for 4 years and he's paying the price today for it. So that might mean those things. Is that success to me? For me personally, no, it's not. For you, it might be. And that's okay. You just have to know what that is.
So basically, I'm just going to show this part of the show to all my coachees, because you said exactly what I need them to understand, is that you need to understand what it is you want. And if it's above and beyond what you've got and you want more, whether it's money or freedom or whatever it is, we need to know what you're doing in order to succeed with doing more of it. Or, how do we get there? And I think that's just brilliant to think about it as what is your success, and don't think about anybody else. You're probably coming to coaching, for example, because you want to do better, quote, more, quote, but you see you have more potential is usually what it is. And so I think that you're always growing and you should always be pushing the limit of what you think success is. But it's interesting to think about it as totally yours to define. And I think a lot of people forget that. If you're not a Kardashian, you haven't succeeded. Well, there's so many amazing people in the world. And I think people need to hear that. I really do. I think people need to hear how many wonderful ways we succeed and they succeed and we can all succeed that don't necessarily look traditional, or they don't look like the capitalist definition of it. And the better we feel about ourselves, I think, Michael, the better people feel about themselves makes them feel better about others. And if we could feel better about others and treat each other just a little bit better, I think we can have a little more peace, inclusion, joy. And so it really does start with us. And that's why I think it's so vital if you can, take time to reflect on what works and what you'd like. And again, it doesn't mean quitting a job. It could mean just saying, you know what? I've been taking the same walk every single day. Like, I actually want to learn how to make jewelry. So I'm going to quit the walks. I have started a jewelry making class. I mean, whatever it is, it can be anything, right? It's creative. It's yours. But the other thing, it was boring and it wasn't serving you. And that's all you need to know, is that you have the right to pick things that do serve you, even if it's not everything, but some aspect of your life.
Yeah. And the other thing I want to say about success is that everything comes at a price. Everything comes with a price, and it's what are you willing to pay for it? And you pay for it in different ways. It could be financial, it could be time, it could be health, it could be so many different things. And so when we're on the topic of success or quitting, it's what are you willing to pay for what you want? And I think back to what you were just saying, and being content with what you have. So there's like this gratitude that comes out of this process of realizing, for me, I'll use myself as an example here. I always wanted a Lamborghini. Grew up, right?
First guy I know who feels that way, for sure.
Grew up always wanting a Lamborghini, and using the same idea here of the $100 million business. Well, in order to get the Lamborghini, outside of the fluke make $1 million overnight kind of thing, which we know never lasts. I mean, so many athletes winning the lottery, so many stories of lottery winners, so many stories of athletes who, go big and go bankrupt very quickly. So we realize that it's fluke and it's overnight, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about sustainable success, right? And in order to keep sustainable success, to own this Lamborghini, what am I willing to pay for it? What am I willing to sacrifice now for it? Because, and I say the now very importantly, because you could build a sustainable business that can earn an X amount of dollars that you can buy the Lamborghini, but you have to give that time away in that present moment in order to get that to then be able to enjoy it maybe later on. Are you willing to do that? And
Right.
so
It's always a choice.
always a choice. And so for me, I learned that I'm not willing to do that. But I want the Lamborghini. And that was the next part of learning was I'm not willing to pay the price, but I still want the Lamborghini. Well,
What do you do about that?
that's where gratitude comes in, right? Because that's where we understand, okay, well, if I'm not willing to do the work and I still want the Lamborghini, what do I have instead of the Lamborghini? What did I not give up in order for me to not own the Lamborghini? I didn't give up my health. I didn't give up my family. And so therefore, those are things I could start appreciating and being really grateful for and start being present with. And I say all of this for everybody listening in that maybe there's something that you really, really wanted growing up or even right now, but realize what sacrifice you might have to give to get it. And if that sacrifice isn't worth giving, well, then whatever that sacrifice is, start living in the present moment with that sacrifice and being grateful for it. And that's going to help you get through where you're at right now.
I love it. Again, I'm just going to show my coachees that because it really is about that. It's like you can't have everything that you want without giving something to it. You can't just say, I want to make more money, but have no idea how to get there and not understand that. I mean, we do it by numbers. That's one thing about real estate that's really interesting is when you are able to take units and what your commissions are and how much, an average house is, and you put those all together, it really shows you what you need to do, right? So you want to double what you're doing. You may have to talk to 10 more people a day. How are you going to talk to 10 more people a day? How are you going to connect with 10 more people a day about real estate? And if you don't, again, back to that, if you don't know why you want to do something, or you don't know the why of why you're giving the time to this other thing, because the why could be travel, but in order to get there, as you said, you've got to do something for it. Unless you win it, unless you inherit it, you're going to have to do something for it, and sometimes that's not comfortable. But I do think one of the things, Michael, that I really like about entrepreneurship, and I think you probably are finding this too, is you do get to give yourself some room to explore and also do things differently. So that is one thing that I really support. In my industry, I feel like there's like certain things you're supposed to do, and I almost never did them, and I still succeeded in the business because it was the way I wanted to do it. I was not willing to just do something because that was supposed to be the way you do it. It's just not me. And that was sort of that back to that, well, I'm quitting doing that, but I'm also going to do it differently. So it's working and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I love how you've really broken out this whole talk today. I'm glad you kind of brought it you've brought it to the table. And it's such an important talk to share with people. I think in your industry, in real estate, it's an important talk because when we think about the real estate industry and how it was created, there's a reason why it's so many women who are involved in it. And it's because they were, either coming from being stay-at-home moms or leaving a different workforce or looking for an entrepreneurial outlet when there wasn't many available or giving them the opportunity for one. And so you're dealing with you're working with a lot of people that may have gone through the shame or guilt of quitting. And so while your talk might be inspiring somebody to quit where they currently are, I think it's also validating those people who might have quit something that they did. And by the way, I see the work and effort that my wife puts into raising our household, and she works too. And I used to think it was 50-50 until we had our second kid. And that's when I learned it was never 50-50. I always say that, like with the first one, I was just like, it's 50-50, it's 50-50. And then we had our second one. I was like, whoa, it is not 50-50. It's her. But I'm saying that even that alone is sometimes feeling like quitting. There's a judgment that comes in of like bailing on my family. Oh, how's the laundry going to get done? How's the food going to get on the table? How are the kids going to get off the bus? And I know that because my wife works and she worries about that stuff. And she's like, Michael, can you do that? And I'm like, I'm their father. Of course I can do it. So I think the other important part of your talk is that you're also validating these women and men, but validating these women for the quitting that they had to do to be in the role that they're in today.
Exactly. Exactly. I really feel strongly that you should give yourself permission to quit some of that negative talk, to quit some of that negative self-thinking, to quit worrying if you're, a good dad if the laundry isn't all done, or you're only a good mom if you get I don't know, enough brownies to a bake sale, right? I mean, there's silly things, but we have to give ourselves permission to let go. And that's the big take. That let go of the things that may not be serving you, to give you room for things that are or will or can. And so I thank you for highlighting that, because I really feel strongly that people need to give themselves some kindness. And it's okay. It's okay to quit. It's okay to be a quitter. It's okay to be, you're not a loser. That's the big thing. You're not a loser. You just quit something.
That's,
and so many people have, and that got them where they wanted to be.
that's right.
Think of Harrison Ford.
That's right. Think of Harrison Ford. And I think too, like in terms of quitting, I mean, there's a lot of bad habits that quitting would be a good thing for. So just think of it that way too, of like, there's a lot of bad habits that quitting is a good thing for. I want to kind of bring it back to Toastmasters and public speaking here. And the reason why I want to do that is you were speaking earlier on about our audience and how important our audience plays a role, or how the role of the audience is important to us as the speaker. And a lot of that has to do with being a really good listener. We were talking about the evaluator and having a good evaluator and providing great feedback, being a great leader and being able to pick people up. And I think the common theme in all of that is being a great listener. And what reminded me to bring this back up for this conversation as we kind of conclude here is you've been a great listener. A lot of times I sit on the other end here and I'm the listener. I'm listening to everything the guest is saying. And I love it, right? Because that's part of what my show is all about. And I always know when I get somebody on that is in the public speaking space, that is a presenter, is a performer, is a keynoter, is someone like you as a past Toastmaster, that we're going to have a great conversation. And the reason why I know that is because it's not just going to be a one-sided of me just listening and them just talking. It's going to be this, like, I felt like a tennis match without the competition involved, but like just a volleying back and forth and back and forth. And so much has to do with your listening etiquette and your listening skills. And so I'm interested to throw it back to you here on where you picked that up and what you can share with our audience on becoming better listeners.
Sure. I mean, I really appreciate that. And thank you. I think it's a practice. I tend to, with the people I'm closest to, they'll be like, stop finishing my sentences. I'm like, I'm just so plugged into what you're saying. I'm really listening. I'm not trying to take over. But so it's a practice. Sometimes I really have to, bite my tongue. But I think that the conversation aspect of relationships has always been really valuable to me. I've been very lucky that I had a family that would sort of sit after meals and chat and have a conversation. My fiance and I will have a sit down, just he'll get back and we'll like have a cup of tea and have a conversation. So for me, that's super exciting. And it's like a way to really have a relationship with someone, is to have a conversation. I think in the public speaking space, we have to be having a conversation with our audience, even though it's technically one-sided. The idea is that you're having a conversation where the people are kind of going, I understand. I understand what you're saying. And, you ask a question. I know you talk to people in the audience and ask them for their feedback. It's so great when they give it, but sometimes they don't, but you're still having a conversation, like it's a relationship. And so I think that the listening part is both internal and external, and it's curiosity. If you're not curious about things, then you probably aren't going to want to hear what other people say. And I think I feel very lucky. Again, it goes back to some of the media of journalism. The reason you ask questions is because you're curious, like, why? Why did you take that money? Or why did that barricade have to come down? It doesn't matter what the subject matter is, it's curiosity. So if we can plug into how curious we are about what the other person is saying, then I think it comes more naturally. But it's not easy. We're very good at having something to say. And the one thing I'll say is I think it was Toastmasters where I was told, I think I said this to you when we first met, that a conversation is about, and not like on a podcast or a speaking, but a real conversation should be about 40 seconds back and forth. Like you get 30 to 50 seconds, I get 30 to 50 seconds. And we all know that person who, I like to call it tangential speaking. You're like, hi, Michael. It's so nice to meet you. I'm glad I'm on the podcast. Podcasts are really interesting. I'm really interested in podcasts. I listened to one in the car the other day, and the new car I got was a Toyota. And I got, and you're like, dude, that's not a conversation whatsoever. That's just you yammering on and listening to your own voice. So that might be a great way to think about it is, has the other person had a chance? Time yourself. Think about it. Practice. It's practice.
Yeah, and I think with what you're saying too is, are you offering value? And because I think it does apply to podcasts too. And I know that I've gone on longer than 40 seconds and you've gone on longer than 40 seconds. I think the important piece there is, are you adding value to the conversation or to the people listening as you're speaking? Yeah. If you're, to your point, if you're just popping from subject to subject, from item to item, well, then what value is there in any of that? You haven't received any feedback on whether that connects with them or doesn't connect with them. So I think that that's very important. The other two things I want to highlight here is curiosity. One of the tips that we get from Toastmasters and from so many other organizations in terms of listening is to listen without asking questions. I'm saying this intentionally this way, is to listen without formulating your own questions, to listen without formulating your own thoughts or ideas that are coming up next. I like that you said to always be curious, because I think that that's the remedy. Is it's easy to say, don't think of your next question or don't think of your next thought. It's easy to say that, but then it's like, well, how do I put that into practice? And I like that you said to be curious, because if I'm truly curious, which I typically am of my guests like yourself, if I'm truly curious about what you're thinking, well, then I'm just going to sit and listen and just be a sponge to what you're saying. And therefore, I don't have any questions. And sometimes I get caught. Like I got caught like 3 times with you, which happens rarely. For me.
I hope I didn't do it.
Well, no, this is wonderful. This is a good thing. Like, I think it's a good thing sometimes when I don't have a question. Like, it kind of catches me off guard because I'm like, I'm a podcast host. I need to have the next question lined up. But also sometimes I get lost in what the other person is saying. And you did that to me 3 times today. And that means that I was so involved or so curious on your story that I was like, I don't have another question yet. And I was like, oh, crap, I better get to my notes and what's next? What's next for her? So I think that that's a huge piece and a compliment to you, of course. And then the other one that I love that you said, because people do not think about it, is practicing. To practice our listening skills. Like, who is in your life right now who maybe is a storyteller or maybe is that tangential talker? Use that, because you're not going to change them, as a listening opportunity. How long can I go?
Oh, I literally sometimes am like, I want to say something. And I just have to, but you know what?
Breathe.
I mean, it happened recently and I was thinking, oh my gosh, this person is like going on and on and on. But I was like, here I am. She obviously needs somebody to be the listener. She ended up, becoming a good friend. So you never know. We never know what it'll lead to. But
they come in all walks and shapes of life. I mean, and that's why I think, Toastmasters or even networking, networking places like chambers of commerce, the different associations you're a part of, serving on a board or a committee. So I'm not talking about just going to the events where you can just be that tangential speaker. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about serving on a board or a committee to where there are agendas and there are speaking times, and you actually only have a certain amount of time to speak, is very beneficial to anybody who maybe thinks that that's what kind of speaker they are, because it puts you in a position where I got to get this thought out in 2 minutes. So I can't go off about my cat and my dog and my car and my house and my life. I have to maybe touch on it so I could give some people some context, which is fine. But also I have to get to the point.
Yeah. That's one of the things we train about coaching. We only have half an hour for a coaching session. So while it's really nice to shoot the shit, I mean, you just don't have time because you're 5 minutes in and now you've lost that time. So it may seem a little curt, but the truth is we're not going to get anywhere if we don't really hone in. So I agree. I think that's great. And honestly, those are good practice because you if you're there and you're not listening, why are you there? Like, why are you there? That's literally why you're part of the committee or group or networking, is to hear others. Like, if you needed to be alone to hear yourself, just go in the bathroom, put your brush up to your mouth and whatever, you know what I mean?
Just start your own podcast.
Your podcast, exactly. Or your monologue.
Something I always like to learn about my guest is a philosophy, a statement, a mantra that you might live by or that you reassert with, on a maybe daily, monthly, annual basis. What's something for you that really stands out?
One of my friends just said to me her motto, which was like, be funny or die. And I was like, what is my motto? And the first thing they came up with was like, cake is life, but that probably is not exactly what we're talking about. But
if that applies to you, it's fine. I love cake.
Is life, yeah. But I think that I have to really come up with something succinct. But for me, it's all about no. I'll tell you what. I've got a tattoo of it, so I know it. Ooh. It's joie de vivre, the French for the joy of life. And I think that it's very, very, very easy on a daily basis to forget what joy is, what can be joy. And again, this is part of the issue of quitting. Like, if you're doing something you're not getting joy out of, why? Like, we don't have the time to do that. We need to be moving toward the direction of joy. So yeah, la joie de vivre. That's what I would offer.
Joie de vivre. My follow-up, of course, is where's the tattoo? and we know where it is now.
It's way more public than you would think, but it's on my arm. But my daughter is horrified. She's like, people can see that. I'm like, yeah, I know.
Well, it's better than your bottom, I suppose, right?
I guess it depends how much you're sharing your bottom. If that's part of your business, then maybe it's okay.
That's right.
I guarantee in real estate, the goal is not to share your bottom.
That is right. That is right. I love that joie de vivre, and it's not just a statement; it's a feeling of what you've brought today, of like this just joy to be here. I could feel it when we communicated the first time. This excitement to meet each other, and your excitement via emails back and forth of getting on today, and even just us setting up our cameras together. There's a different energy that you brought that isn't always brought. There are definitely guests that come on that have done this, so many times that it's no longer, it doesn't have its same allure, or they're doing it because their company or their PR manager told them they should do it. And so they bring a different energy. It's not to knock them in any way, but what I'm saying here about you is that you had this energy and it was nervous and it was excited and it was just like coming in here, and you were just so happy to be here that you truly live into that statement. And so I love that that's your mantra.
Well, thank you. I do appreciate that. And that is one of the great things about being in the businesses I'm in the business you're in. And I really am grateful for the invitation. And I do think that it's super fun to have somebody who's doing what you're doing, but in a different way. Like, what you speak about and who you are, it's going to be different, obviously, than what I speak about, who I am. But the fact is, we have this like commonality, and to understand that's the goal of sharing with other people, because I know you shared that with me about how you speak. I haven't seen you speak, but I know that the feedback from like Howie is it's amazing, and that you really bring who you are. And again, it just goes back to that idea of authenticity and being yourself and getting the opportunity to be yourself. So I'm grateful. I can't wait to see you speak. I'm sure they're going to be on humongous stages sooner than later. This first speech is just going to be your catapult, and then see ya. Try to remember the little people.
It's exciting. I'm very excited. And again, it goes back to Toastmasters real quick, in that it was my first mentor at Toastmasters, Linda Grace Farley, who pulled me aside and said to me, I think it was her, but she used somebody else, used third party. And I think that was kind of her way of getting me to listen, where she said to me, she goes, Michael, you're a great speaker, but what some other people have said to me is that you're not really showing your true self. And you're kind of like faking it when you're up there. they all have said that they really want to see your true self. She said it some way like that. I just remember her putting it as a third party. But I'm like, Linda, I know it was you. And I'm so grateful that she did, because that's when I went from, if you look at my old YouTube videos, from like having this like tone and this way of speaking that was deaf to my audience, to being more engaged with my audience and being more authentic, being me. I mean, the truth is, I don't speak like this all the time, because this is kind of like my podcast voice and how I am, but it's truly me, and I'm authentic with who I am. And so it was something that really changed my speeches and my public speaking, I guess, aura.
Yeah, I have a coach. I just submitted a 5-minute, I guess, test of a speech. And the worst part about it was I knew that it felt like it was a script. It wasn't, and it's really hard, right, to speak for 5 minutes, enough to convey what kind of speaker you are. So that's a practice, but I'm with you, and I can't wait to see you, because you're going to inspire me more and more. I think it's about not a script. I think it's about talking to people, and back again to that conversation. If you're on a script, you're speaking one direction. If you're talking and speaking with people, then you're on another. And my coach calls it spotlight versus lighthouse. So spotlight means you're it. Everybody's there for you. You're the star. But if the lighthouse, you think about it, the lighthouse light like covers everybody, and it goes back and forth, and it kind of covers everybody and then goes back and forth. And that's the goal, I think, of great speakers, is to make sure that it's not just about them. In fact, it's not about them at all. It's really about this wide array of people who are listening.
It's always about the audience. Of course, this will be in the show notes, but if you could share with all of our audio listeners any way to connect with you, social or any other websites or anything that you want to share.
Absolutely. It's basically wherever you are. It's kat.timpson so either Instagram, Facebook. I do have a website, because everybody in Coldwell Banker has one. I don't know if it gets used as much as I'd like, but I'd love to connect with anyone on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. I don't know. Do people use I don't get to use Facebook a lot. It's just not something that I'm involved with completely, but Instagram for sure. So DM me anytime.
Awesome. It's been such a great conversation with you. I've really had a fun time.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to The Michael Esposito Show. For show notes, video clips, and more episodes, go to michaelespositoinc.com/podcast. Thank you again to our sponsor, Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. That's DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den10, you're giving back on a global scale. This episode was produced by Uncle Mike at the iHeart Studios in Poughkeepsie. Special thanks to Lara Rodrian for the opportunity, and my team at Michael Esposito Inc.